Welcome to For the Love of Books, Bees Books Edition, a podcast by North Lanarkshire Libraries.
This is Pari.
And this is Jenny, and we're here to talk about
Bees books. Well, the theme that Bee gave us this time that I had forgotten for like half a second, but it's here very helpfully in front of me, is closer to home.
Yes.
Which is quite a sort of all-encompassing theme. You can fit in anything. But I have a question.
Oh, right,
for
okay.
you. What is your favorite thing to do at home?
Read.
Okay, that was not a difficult question at all. What is your favorite spot in the home to read?
I've got a nice beanbag in a warm spot. I'm like a cat. I follow the warm spot round the room on my beanbag.
I have a follow-up question.
This is like the third follow-up question.
When you sit down on the beanbag, is it difficult for you to stand back up?
Yes, because I'm old.
I think it's only primary school children who are, or maybe when you're in school, you can do that.
No,
and then after that, it's just increasingly decrepit.
It's not elegant
No.
getting up or getting down, to be fair. I kind of flump down and hope for the best.
I think the idea of a beanbag is sound, but the practicalities of it, I feel like I would find a way to do like a cartoon fall.
Yes.
every time.
And how about you? What's your favourite thing to do at home?
Well, now that you've put reading in my head,
Oh.
I also like to read. I also like to cook.
Oh, right, okay.
But I like to read in the summer and spring when it's sunny out in the back garden. That's my favorite. There's a pine tree behind me in the neighbor's garden, and there's like a river next to me, and there's a row of like plants where squirrels come and
lovely.
birds come. It feels very idyllic for
However,
like the middle of Glasgow.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would read. I would be too busy looking at all the wildlife. So.
It's a good break because sometimes the squirrels will be really adventurous. I've not seen a fox yet. So I've seen a fox from home, like when I'm in, like my kitchen faces it, but no one's ever come up to me while I was reading. Then I would feel big Snow White energy.
Yes.
Foxes, deer. Yeah, so yes. Okay, well, I want to now find out what your books are for Closer to Home.
So I have My Friends by my favourite author ever in the entire world, galaxy, universe, whichever is the biggest, Frederick Backman.
Yeah.
And my second book is Himself by Jess Kidd.
And how do they both fit into the theme? You look very dubious right off the bat.
Squashily.
Okay.
I shall explain more once we find out what your books are.
Okay. My first book is called How to Be Brave by Daisy Mae Johnson. Excellent cover.
I'm going to interrupt you about the cover there and say it's very much Jacqueline Moriarty kind of a cover.
You are very right, yes. It's the first in so far a trilogy.
I like how you put so far.
Yeah, because I'm optimistic,
sure.
but I think it is a trilogy because in the first book there's a girl. Her name is Calla, and she has two friends, recently made friends at the side of her, looking, peeking curiously, and elements of the book around. The second one is called How to Be True, which stars another one of the friends. So her Calla's story is over in this book, but she's still a part of her story. So she comes in the front, and then the third book is How to Be Free, and then she comes to.
Right.
So I don't know that there are more friends for more books unless you circle back to Calla again, which is possible. My second book is called Bookish, How Reading Shapes Our Lives by Lucy Mannigan. Lucy, by Lucy.
Lucy,
Yes.
Hi, Lucy.
And I love books about books. So this is yet another contribution in the genre about books about
I am surprised how many books about books there are out there. I did not know this, even working in the library, until you came along, Pari.
Well, I have so many more books. I've been trying to space them out because I have a really mad amount of nonfiction books currently that I've borrowed from libraries, and too many of them are about books. So I like read a book about a book, and then I read something else, and then I read a book about
Fair
it.
enough.
So I'm trying to do that, yes.
Right, okay. Well, I will talk about my first book, if that's okay. My first book is Himself by Jess Kidd. And the only way I can squish it into Closer to Home is because last time we were Faraway Places. And this is closer to here because it's set in Ireland. So it's closer to home. It's not right bang in the middle of home, but it's closer.
It has the same vibes as well, Celtic brotherhood, sisterhood,
Absolutely,
whatever.
Yes. This was a book that ended up on my desk because of a cataloguing issue. And I read the first page, which turned into the first chapter. And I was hooked. And I was like, oh no, I need to read all of this now.
I need to forget about the cataloguing
Yes.
error or whatever. Yeah.
I did fix it, it's fine. But it took me a while to actually get to read it, as these things do, because we've all got too many books and also we have to work, which boo. But I absolutely adored it. So the beginning, well, the prologue is 1950. 1950 exactly, May 1950, and somebody's murdered. You're basically there while she gets murdered in a forest. And then it flips to 1976, so 26 years later, and the person, another reason it gets to closer to home is because somebody comes back to that village, so they're kind of going home. The person who I've completely forgotten the name of, Mahoney, is a boy, and basically he is the son of this woman that got murdered. He doesn't know any of that. He has ended up in an orphanage in Ireland in the 70s. I think it was run by nuns, as most of them were. He's now 25, 26. And one of the nuns has passed away or something like that. I never quite got a hold of this, but she left him something, and it was like a postcard which basically said, this is Francis, as your name is, please take care of him, something in his hometown. He didn't know any of that before. He was just told he was abandoned, and that was it. So he decides to go back and find out what happened to his parents. So at first glance, you kind of think you know where it's going to go. You know, that way he's going to go back, he's going to find the murderer being done. However, when he gets there, he goes to the local pub, and he kind of walks in, he starts talking to the guy, and all of a sudden you realise he can see ghosts. Which is slightly unexpected. So they're kind of, he knows that they're there, he just ignores them. They just look like us, but slightly more see-through. And some of them seem to be kind of slightly stuck where they are. Some of them, for example, there's somebody in a pub that tries to steal his pint, but his hand just goes through the pint glass. But it's very cleverly done, because it's not a big deal in the book, if you see what I mean. It's just happening. And he just kind of gets on with what he's doing and ignores it.
And he used to not be able to see ghosts before.
No, he seems to have been able to see them for quite some time.
So he's used to the ghost in his surroundings.
Yes. So you get that and you think, right, okay, he's going to go and he's going to see his mum's ghost because his mum was murdered, etc., etc. And that is not what happens at all. He makes friends with this very theatrical lady who's very old now, but she still likes to put on a show every year in the church kind of hall. And she sometimes does things just a little bit strangely. So she will pick a play and cast it and, you know, all that kind of stuff, but she likes to tweak it slightly, and the priest sometimes doesn't like how she tweaks it, even though they're raising money for funds for the church and things like that. The priest is not a nice character, and not a nasty character, but he's got his own agenda. But the theatrical lady, who I can't remember the name, sorry, has a ghost with her, and it's one of her many husbands, or almost husbands, who still kind of hangs around. There's also a tiny, tiny touch of magic in it. Not magic with big shaking hands, but just like a tiny bit of magic, which really adds to the story. So even if you don't like magic, you don't like ghosts or anything, this is still a really good book. The things are just happening at the side.
So how would you categorize this book? Is it like a cozy village?
No, it's
happening.
It's there's nothing cozy about it, because the village, when the village discover who this guy is, all the older ones, so all the ones that are around when his mum was around, obviously don't want anything raked up. However, he's a very good looking guy. And it's the 70s, so very tight trousers were in fashion with huge bell bottoms. You know, the hair's all very much, you know, so the younger generation instantly fall in love with him, and want to be up on that stage with him, because he auditions for the show as a way to talk to people about things. And it, you know, everybody does realise who he is. And and it's just very cleverly done. There's a few twists and turns in it, and even when you think it's over and they've done what they needed to do, there's a bit extra that kind of goes, well, actually, we didn't tie up this loose end.
Right.
But they don't tie up that loose end. They say, we've not tied up this loose end. And that's it.
So it's a mystery with like a accoutrement.
Oh, that was a good word. I'm not going to try and pronounce
No.
Yes, it's not a murder book. It's not like anything like that. It's not a horror book. It's not a crime. It's just a good story. I would say it's a story.
With different elements.
Yes, yes. Some of the characters are brilliant. I mean, this theatrical lady, she's tiny, you know, she's withering away, but she gets her sparkle back because of this. It's very well described. You can picture yourself in this small Irish village in the 70s. You know, there's no mobile phones. You know, it's not like it is now when you try to find out who your parents were or whatever. You know, you have to be told. You know, it's all very secretive. And you find out that it's not just the one murder that's happened. There's other things that have happened around that. It was very, very good, and it's made me want to read more by this author. I've not read anything by her before, but I do have another couple of her books out just now. I just liked her style of writing, just quite. She's telling a story, but you know, it's a bit unusual story. Does that make sense?
The cover itself gives off a slightly sinister vibe, because first of all, the title himself is, I don't know, very scary for some reason. And the cover is like white and grey with trees growing from the words, and it just feels like very a specific kind of story. But from what you've said, it's many specific kinds of stories.
I think if you like crime, you like it. If you like something a wee bit spooky, you like it. If you don't like either of those things, I think you would still like it. The voice is quite Irish as well, but without being so much that you can't. It's not like Buddha Dad, where you have to get into the you know, the kind of way
dialect.
But you can also tell it's Ireland. You know what I mean? And like some of the things they do is very much how we think of the things, you know. But again, although it could be a small village in Scotland, it could be a small village in Yorkshire. You know, it's more the small village that you're focusing on rather than anything else.
That's nice. It sounds like the village itself, like, I love saying this, is a character. And the people, it's sort of like you're getting to know the village and its people through all these weird...
I mean, there's so many different types of characters in it. Like, there's a kind of hermit guy. There's a woman who, you know, just has like an axe and, you know, is just very much
so like
gung-ho and just like...
So weirdos.
But we've also got like a policeman who's kind of keeping an eye on everything, making sure that nothing happens. You've got the priest, you've got the owner of the pub who's a bit of a ladies' man, but you know, perhaps not really. Like he thinks he is, but you know, and just also I enjoyed the different generations, the fact that because it does jump backwards and forwards a few times to his mum telling her story slightly. And I liked that. I liked kind of seeing, you know, we know, you know, by chapter, whatever, what the pub guy is like. But then you see him 25 years ago, and then you realise, well, 25 years ago, he probably was a bit of a ladies' man. And
so does it skip forward and backwards in
not
time?
Too much where you kind of get annoyed with it, enough for you to understand what the characters are like now, 25 years later, and to understand why, you know, they're maybe a bit grumpy or, you know, what happened before, how it's affected things, and why suddenly Mahoney turning up, you know, is kind of put the cat amongst the pigeons.
That sounds like a fun sort of, a bit of an experiment, but not so much that it'll be off-putting.
Yes,
And with all the characters and stuff, like of a like specific Irish village that others might be able to recognize.
I would say as well, it's set in kind of May in both times, I think. I would read it as a winter book, if that makes sense to you. Although, you know, it is set in sunnier times, it's a good book to kind of
cozy up
with. As I say, it's not scary. It's not, because I wouldn't have read it if it was scary. And the ghosts are characters in themselves, you know, they're quite funny. You know, there's a ghost that lives in the town hall, which used to be a school, like, you know, many years ago. And she loves poetry, but, you know, nobody says poetry anymore. So he actually visits her a couple of times and like starts like, you know, telling her poems, just reading poetry to her. But of course, anybody that walks in will just see him reading poetry to himself out loud. You know, it's wee bits like that, and there are some funny bits in it. It's hard to describe, you know, but
It's really intriguing.
I'm glad it was not catalogued properly.
Yeah, I don't think I would ever sort of even think of like exploring this, but it sounds like a weird enough book that might be up my alley,
I
down
think
my alley.
weird is a good way of describing it in a nice way.
Oh no, I love weird.
Yeah.
I'm all about
And I will say that I think there's like a paperback version with a different cover,
Right.
and I can't remember what the cover's like, but I remember when I kind of looked at it and I thought, oh no, I probably wouldn't have read the first chapter from the other cover,
Right.
but because this was a bit atmospheric,
No,
I would
it
say.
is very atmospheric, and that's why the winter thing sounds
Yeah,
alright.
yes.
Okay, really cool. So mine is a very different kind of book. I'm going to talk about How to Be Brave first. So it starts off with Elizabeth North, who's Calla North's mum. And we see her like sort of growing up and then being sent to this boarding school when her parents die, which is an unusual place to start a story, not with the protagonist, but with her mum. And then we sort of learn things about it. Like, it takes a good chunk of like the book, the beginning of the book. So like maybe 1/3 or so that we're like learning about her and her friendships and enemies and things, and how she becomes like first befriends ducks and then becomes obsessed with ducks. So much so that when she grows up, she becomes a world-renowned duck researcher. But she's very bad at being a person. Like she's very good at being like a mum, but she's bad at certain things. So it means that they never have enough money. She keeps sort of cycling through jobs and, you know, things. So they're growing up a bit like sort of not poor, well, kind of poor. And it's only her and Calla and Elizabeth live together. But then she finds this fantastic opportunity. Like someone gets in touch with her. They're going to send her off to the Amazon to research a specific kind of duck that lives there. And she's the one that has the most knowledge. And they're paying, like it's an all expenses paid thing.
Dream job.
Dream job. But she can't take her daughter with her because her daughter needs to go to school and stuff. So she decides to send her to the same boarding school that she used to be in. So the home that I have kind of thing is, it sort of starts closer to home. Like I guess they're growing up. But then she's sent away to a boarding school and she's not very happy about it at all. But then she does find home in the boarding school because she makes friends. And this boarding school is run by nuns, but not the kind of nuns possibly your friend and himself was a part of. They're all like weird nuns. They're all like, one of them is obsessed with like biscuits and pastries and things. So she always has things hidden all over the school, like her stash, so that and she has like a good cupboard full of cakes and biscuits in her sort of office, so that she can always like either eat or share with people. She's like a very good nun.
Excellent.
There's another nun who's really good at cooking, so she supplies this headmistress with all her biscuits and pastries. Another teaches light aircraft maintenance to the girls. Like that's one of the subjects that they think girls should know. So
when is it set? Is it fictional as in?
It doesn't say. So it like there are cell phones. So she's in touch with her mum, I think, with the cell phone. But it still feels very old-timey. So it's that kind of liminal sort of thing where you don't quite know. You feel like now, because one of the characters here, one of the friends Calla ends up making, she loves books and she loves the library, like is always there. So she's mentioning books that are more contemporary, like now. So you have like a touch of the modern, a touch of like, she mentions old favorites as well. But it's almost like this timeless space, and it doesn't really matter because obviously there are airplanes and phones.
I suppose though, because it is in a boarding school, boarding schools are like that,
Yes.
you know, like they're the same 25 years ago as they are, do you know?
But this is like, I love school stories.
You do.
And I know, so Daisy Mae Johnson, I actually knew of her from when I was in India, because she used to run a children's book blog. And I used to have a book blog, and we became sort of blog buddies. And we became friends like on Twitter, didn't like really meet, or like just sort of knew of each other. And she's from Yorkshire, I think, and she loves books. She studied, I think she did a PhD in children's literature as well. And this is her first book. And you can tell that how much she loves children's books and how much she loves books. And it's like really full of oddball characters, and how much she loves school stories. She loves the chalet school books like madly. So she loves school stories, and she's like taken bits and pieces from all over and put them in. But she's also put her own twist on it. So when this Scala goes to the school, she thinks that it's all like, oh, she has trouble fitting in the beginning because she misses her mom. She's away from her home. But now then, like, she makes these two friends whose names I have absolutely forgotten.
It's not just me then.
Yes, no. But really, they become really good friends. One of them is French, I know, and she's very like, oh, viva la resistance, because what happens is the school is taken over by an evil headmistress. So not the good nun, an evil nun who used to be friends with Elizabeth, so Cala's mum. No, well, not friends, nemesis.
No,
Friends is
the complete
completely
opposite.
the opposite of friend, nemesis of Elizabeth. And she is determined to, like, all the fun and games and like all the good things have to go away. So no biscuits, no cakes, no light aircraft maintenance and all that nonsense. So she's like sort of trying to make it like a proper school, what she thinks. And in the meanwhile, her mum's gone missing. So you find, so like all sorts of things are happening throughout, all sorts of mad things and shenanigans. So her friend, this French girl whose name I have completely forgotten, is like leading a revolution to bring down the headmistress's cruel reign with all the tiny children and so she keeps giving them like tasks to do. So it's a really like fun book, and like all sorts of like mad characters, and like even just like offhandedly like random things are happening, and there are like lots of in-jokes that I'm sure she wrote like for a specific kind of audience who would recognize it from a specific school story and things, and just so fun. Like, I love this book. And I read this a few years ago when it first came out. Recently reread it because I wanted to read the second and third book, and they're also both just excellent. So her story ends here, like I said. The second one focuses on, I think, the French girl, and the third on, I think she's British, Polish, maybe half British, half Polish. But just fantastic. And it's just so much fun, and like the kind of children's book I completely love because it's weird. It has madcap characters, madcap shenanigans, but also so much heart. Like at the end, I was so emotional about it all because they love each other, and they like, they're working together and doing mad things, but all for each other. And especially the last one was really moving. I think it is the last one because it ends nicely. But so does this. Like, this also ends well.
It's a standalone. You wouldn't need to.
You wouldn't need to. You wouldn't say that this leaves you unsatisfied. Like, you'd love to read. That's why I said trilogy for now, because I think if she writes, like, Chalet School series, she wrote for generations. So she would write a book which would be standalone, and then like it kept moving to, so the original kids, the girls have children of their own, and then it follows their adventures. So it could possibly like span. Yeah, but it ends like really nicely and really like touchingly, I think, like all three books. So it's great. I fully recommend.
This looks like a shiny new copy. But you say it's been out a few years.
Yes, but this has come here on my recommendation.
Okay.
Because I loved it and I wanted us to have it. I feel like I need to drop a hint of a recommendation for the other two as well, because
absolutely, I'm going to read it as well, so I will want the other two.
Life is much poorer with just like one in this mad nun world of this school, but just lovely.
Oh, very nice. I must admit that the cover, as soon as you showed me, did remind me of the Bronte.
Yes,
Mechanism.
You're right. I never thought of it. But
and you look at it and you see something different, and probably when you read the book, you'll suddenly go, "Oh, right, it makes sense. So there's a helicopter on the front."
Yes, and there's biscuits and cakes.
Yeah. Oh,
and this is the evil headmistress. Yes, and a duck, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like silly, it doesn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time, it's like talking about really like sort of important to the characters things that you're totally riveted, or at least I was totally riveted. So yes, you would love this book, I
I will
think, as
read it,
well.
yes. You've made me love stories about schools again.
Oh,
so,
I'm glad
yes.
because there's just something about them that you feel, especially if you grew up. I don't know if did you grow up reading school stories?
Not really. No.
So in India, like I mentioned this before, Enid Blyton I don't know if she still is, used to be this big sort of cultural part of a touchstone, like cultural part of our reading habits. And she has two, I think, which I've completely forgotten, but two kinds of school stories. So Mallory Towers is one, and the other one I've forgotten.
It's funny because I've read a lot of Enid Blyton, but I don't remember reading any of the
Right.
school ones.
Yes.
It was always more the kind of fantasy type ones.
Right, yeah, the
Faraway
pixies and
things
stuff.
like that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for me, at least, the major ones were Famous Five, Faraway Tree, Secret Seven, Mallory Towers, and the fifth one that I'm
Can't
totally
remember.
forgetting now. But it gave me like this love for school stories because it seemed like such a foreign concept, boarding schools, but then they have midnight feasts and French teachers there's to be a prankster who's to always target the French teacher for some reason, and just like different kinds of characters, some the baddies, some the goodies, some the medium me's.
Which I think you will probably get in, or that
Yeah.
kind of way is you just need to look at Hogwarts or the Scholomance series. There's
Exactly.
different people all enclosed in a small space and not like a school where you would go home at the end of the day. You are there, so the good things to do is midnight feasts, but there's also the badder side.
But I also really loved it because like I went to an all-girls school as well in my like when I was growing up, and this like a lot of children's literature then to an extent now though I think is getting better, but definitely when I was growing up, the boys were the one who were like take charge and sort of go and like do things, whereas the girls were like either background characters or would be like sort of like a bit boring. You wouldn't really see yourself. Whereas these boarding schools, they were all girls, including most of the teachers as well. So you felt like the protagonists in your own story, and you didn't have to be a certain kind of girl. There were all kinds of girls, and they had like so much agency and so much like character and personality, like different kinds, that I never thought like then being a girl or a girl reader was lesser than reading these kinds of stories. And I think this one does that as well. Like even the nuns, they all have such like weird, mad personalities, but as individuals rather than this behemoth of
they feel like real people.
Yes. Even though they're there for like maybe a little bit of time. So I love school stories for so many reasons, but this is one of them.
Fabulous.
Yes.
There are no schools in my next door.
No.
I was trying to think there while you were talking.
Maybe.
So Frederick Backman is my favourite author. He is from somewhere far away.
Sweden? Norway?
He lives in Stockholm, Sweden. Yes, thanks. But his books, although I think they're probably set around about there, there's never really any names to anything that you couldn't put anywhere else. So my favourite trilogy, the Beartown trilogy, which is about hockey but not really about hockey, is set obviously somewhere where they play hockey, but that could be Canada, that could be anywhere, if you know what I mean. It's never specifically there. This book's the same. You know that they're in a big city at one point, but you've no idea what that city is. So you can let your imagination go. If you want that big city to be London, or you want that big city to be New York, or whatever, you can kind of shape it to how you want it. And it's, I think, rare for an author to tell you such a good story and to let you have your imagination of what the characters look like and where it's set. Does that make sense?
Is he... correct me if I'm wrong, but is it translated from Swedish?
Yes.
So I wonder how much role the translator plays in that as well, because I'm sure there are like references that Swedish readers would catch and like recognize, but the translator's job, I guess, is to make it more accessible to a wider audience.
I never really thought about it that way.
That would be such a cool collaboration, because you need to have things that I guess a Swedish reader would still recognize in terms of English, because they'd read English too, but more, I guess, universal. So that sounds really interesting.
And it was good because basically it's about I can't pin this down to one thing, so I'm going to use lots of words here. It's about growing up, it's about childhood, it's about friendships, it's about relationships, it's about generational gaps, and it's about art, all squished into one fabulous story. And again, this is a proper story. This is by page 50, I was in floods of tears because I was that committed to the characters by that point, and something happens and it was just, in fact, I've marked the page when I started crying. And he does it so well. He just makes you love the characters straight away. And the bad characters, he makes you understand why they hate him, the bad characters, you know. It's just, he's just such a wonderful author, stroke with translation. So basically, it's about these kids 25 years ago, again, a bit like the other book. And it's about, they're basically about a couple of summers. The kids, they go to school, but they don't enjoy school. They're slightly misfits. You know, they've got issues at home because they're from a kind of town, so not a village as such, but a town. It's the kind of place where everybody works at the docks, and all the dads are quite hard men who drink, and all the mums are kind of, you know, put up with, you know, that kind of a thing. And, you know, the kids grow up thinking that that's how things are supposed to be, and it just goes on. But these kids have kind of found each other because they are slightly different. The two main characters, the first one called the artist, you don't find out the artist's name till very, very, very late on. And I'm going to pronounce this very poorly, but I called him Jort. Again, that name doesn't say any particular place in the world to me. It's just a name. But basically, the artist gets slightly bullied, and Jort comes in and rescues him, and then spends the rest of his, you know, his childhood sticking up for him. You know, and the artist sometimes feels as if he wasn't there, Jort wouldn't get into trouble, because he always gets into trouble, but basically because he's trying to protect him. And it kind of jumps back and forwards between now and 25 years ago. Now the artist is a famous artist. His first ever painting is in a gallery and it's getting sold. And our other main character, who is called, I don't know, she's 18. Louisa, she's 18 and she's been in foster care, and basically when she hits 18 they get turfed out and she has to find her way in the world. She had a best friend called Fish who's passed away recently. She was 18 sooner than Louisa, so she kind of was kicked out and got into bad company. But Louisa has had this postcard, which she found in one of the care homes at some point, and has kept from every home that she's like been passed through. She's always kept this, and it's a postcard of the artist's picture. So she finds out that it's going to get auctioned and it's going to be in this gallery. So she gets into the gallery, or the auction house, I think it is, to see this in real life and kind of see something that you can't really see in the postcard. And then it turns into kind of like, you know, she does something and then we find out one of the kids from the younger generation, who's grown up now. Well, he's 39, but to Louisa he's like ancient. He's there at the time, and she meets somebody else, and it's coincidences, but believable coincidences, if that makes sense. You know, that, you know, she does this and then she gets chased out the auction house because they think she's going to steal the painting, because she goes right up close to it, and she's got cans of paint in her bag, and so they automatically put two together and go, oh, she's here to, you know, as some kind of protest, you know, in the gallery, to spray paint everywhere. But she's not, she's there to see it in real life. And stuff happens, and then she meets up with Ted, who's one of the kids from 25 years ago, and he's kind of telling her their story and how the painting came to be. But it's just a wonderful story, because you're getting the story of 25 years ago. You're getting the story of what is happening now. But my favourite thing about it is when Louise is hearing that story, she's hearing it for the first time. As us reading the book, we're hearing that for the first time. But for Ted, this all happened 25 years ago, so he knows the outcome. And Louisa keeps saying to him, but this is all fresh for me. This is all new. So you might know this character, this person lives or dies, but I don't know. The mean dad that beats up the kid, that's happening to her right now because she's hearing the story. Whereas to Ted, that's 25 years ago and is kind of blunted slightly, if you know what I mean, by the past. And I love that. I love that she was like us, that she's like, you might know the story, but we don't, and we're learning it as we're going along. And because of the way he writes, and it is kind of flipping backwards and forwards, you're suddenly like, no, and he doesn't just flick backwards and forwards in a straight line. So sometimes he's jumping like 25 years, and sometimes he's jumping 23 years, and then he's jumping to, he kind of jumps around like that when Ted's telling the story, and she like gets really annoyed with him, and
But that's how you would tell a story, right? It's like, especially if you're talking about something probably from your past, you're like jumping about when you say things.
Exactly. But Louise is fantastic, and it's the kind of story as well where you kind of think you know where it's going, and because Frederick Bacon always builds things up, like Beartown is a supreme example of something's coming, and he just builds that tension and builds that tension, and then wham, a third of the way through the book, you're there. It's not quite what you expected, and then you get it. This is similar. You think you know what's happened because of the way Ted's telling the story. You're going, oh no, you kind of cringe and go,
you're like on tenterhooks throughout.
Oh no, something really bad's going to happen to this person. And then you find out something else, and Louisa goes, all right, okay. But then you hear something else, and you're like, oh no, wait a minute. And you kind of do what I'm doing just now. You kind of got off your chair slightly, and you go, oh, wait a minute, but what about those? We skipped that, and what's happening here? And then you kind of go, right, okay, I know what's happening now. And then something else happens, and you're like, oh no. But it kind of jumps around, so nothing's in a straight line. However, there is like one kind of thread throughout it that is told in a more of a straight line. And I just, again, if you were to ask me where this fits in, what kind of genre it is, it's fiction. But it's so much more.
Like, I think Beartown was the same when you were talking about it. Like, it's just a good story. He's just a good storyteller. And I love that. I feel like if he wrote about something that you absolutely hate, you would still read it.
Absolutely.
Because you're like, you trust this author. So, because when you were kind of describing it to me, it didn't sound fully like the kind of book you would have picked up otherwise if his name had not been on it. So he could write about like anything in the world and you would follow him. But that's so nice that he could, first of all, that he's built that kind of trust, because I know he's really popular with like a lot of other people as well, but also that he can open up people's sort of because if you read a lot, at least for me, you find out what your likes and dislikes are, and your sort of comfort zones, and the kinds of out of comfort zones you're willing to tread, but where your sort of boundaries are. But if you find someone that you love, like for me, Frances Harding is one of them, that I would go with her, wherever she goes, and I would be interested because of her skill in storytelling and his skill.
I think that's what he's like her, that he tells a story, and that because I find with her books as well now that you totally like want to know what's going to happen to each and every one of the characters, and they're slightly disappointed when some characters are kind of side characters, and you're like, no, I now want a book about that character, because it's that kind of thing. And this was exactly the same, and I love the fact that Louisa was asking the questions that we would ask. If we were sitting reading just Ted's story, we would be shouting at the book going, but what happened here? What happened next?
Ted.
And of course he's at the time of Louisa's basically almost kidnapping him, although she keeps kidding on that he's kidnapped her. Nobody's kidnapped anybody, but it sometimes feels like that.
A very intriguing sentence.
They're both right in there middle of grief. They've both lost somebody really close to them, and it touches on that as well. So he does deal with lots of like big issues, but kindly, if you know what I mean, and not dismissively in any way, but he doesn't make them too big.
Like that's not the only point of this book.
Yeah. And also other things are happening, you know, when, you know, you're in grief or, you know, any kind of emotion. Sometimes you forget that the people around you might be having something different at the time, and it's about how you kind of work that out. But Louise is just fabulous, you know. She just, because she's grown up in care, she doesn't have like a fantastic education or anything. She's smart, but she also comes up with like bad plans and things like that. One of them going into this auction house and getting as close as she could to the picture. But she also just says things like, you know, she will also just say to Ted, you know, shut up, you know, or like they're on a train for some of the journey, because again they're going from a big city where the auction was to Ted's hometown, which is why I've squashed it into close to home.
I didn't even challenge you. Where is the hometown?
They're getting closer and closer to home as the story goes on. Also, Louisa, you know, she didn't really have a home, but she identifies so much with the story that's going on and with these kids that she kind of wants to stay on the train, even though she also wants to go off the train and go somewhere else, you know. It's kind of like that. But she just opens her mouth and she just decides that Ted fancies the conductor on the train and will just say, you know, things. So basically, she says, you're quite boring, you know, you're a teacher. And we find out he's not a boring teacher, stuff's happened, but you know, the conductor's not going to like you. So basically, when the conductor comes round, she says to him, he's just out of prison. And we're celebrating because he's just got out of prison. And of course, Ted's completely horrified. The conductor doesn't quite know what to do with that information. But the conductor like appears every now and again because he's going up and down the train to get people's tickets. You also meet another couple of people on the train as well, and there's like these stories there as well. It's just like a book of stories. It's just, I could go on forever, but I won't. But I am going to say one thing.
It is a joy though. Like I love hearing people talk about their favorite authors or anything that they're really passionate about.
I will say that he's written a short story, and you know that I don't like short stories, but as you say, because
you
I love
would
him,
read, I
will read it.
If he writes a horror novel also, I feel like you would.
Yes, I would. But I thought this is lovely. So they're talking about parents, you know, the younger, the 25-year-ago people's parents, and I just thought this was lovely. They were talking about their mum and so-and-so's mum and dad was talking about his big brother, about his parents. So basically his dad passed away when he's quite young, so he doesn't remember his dad not being poorly, but his older brother does remember how much fun he was and all that kind of stuff, and how him and his mum, you know, were in love, whereas Ted just seen it as caring for. And he says it isn't like in the movies, Ted. Mum and dad, you know, it wasn't all glamorous and everything. Swear word there, I was trying to skip over. It isn't like him and mum were magnets. It was more like they were two colours, and once they were mixed together, there was no way of separating them. And I thought that was just lovely, just a lovely kind of sentiment. There's bits of that dotted around. Again, not big in your face things, but just real things.
Very like sort of quiet poetry.
Yes, but I will stop now because I could go on forever and I'll end up spoiling it for somebody who wants to read it.
I might read it. It's because it sounds like it is a bit out of my comfort zone, but in like a way that I think I would be interested in.
You read, did you not?
No, it's on my
Mother's.
Oh yes, is that the same person?
That's the same person.
I loved that.
It's similar to that, in that, you know how in my grandmother sends her regards and her apologies, the longest title ever. There's lots of stories going on.
Yeah.
So there's the young girl doing what she's been told to do, but you understand there's lots of stories building.
Yeah.
It's like that. You know, it's one thing, but there's lots of other things like happening. I think if you enjoyed that, you would enjoy this.
No, and Beartown is on my list as well. It's just that there are like, my list is I think about 2,000.
No, exactly.
So, no,
and I think once you read one of his books, you would want to read the rest.
Yeah.
And therefore, you know.
Yes. So you are like,
Yeah.
welcome to the cult.
Yeah.
You're part enough. Well, I think Lucy, whose last name I can't quite pronounce, Mangan, it's easy enough, I suppose.
Mangan, if you say it quicker.
Mangan.
My Mangan.
That makes it sound like. But she would very much, I think, appreciate and sympathize with your passion because I think I've spoken about her first book on the podcast, or I've hallucinated talking about her first book on the podcast.
What was the first
It was called Bookworm, and it was a memoir of childhood reading.
Oh, that rings a bell.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was a long time ago, so both of us have forgotten. But that one focused on her sort of like she's like a book person, like a book person in a way that I recognize, and I think you would as well. Like her whole personality is books, and she like sort of like would rather hang out with books than people. Like I like people as well. So I think, but she's an introvert and I'm an extrovert, so I feel like that comes into play. Her first book focused on sort of her until she started university, I think. Her books, or as she became a teenager. So children's books, and this takes off from there. So even though it has a grandiose kind of how reading shapes our lives, it's mostly she's talking about her life, but using that, I guess, to open up conversations and possibilities. So it starts from her teenage reading to now. I have like a couple of chapters left, but she's married, she's had a kid. She's and then like I'll tell you where I'm at right now. But it's basically just so the home bit here, as BNU would challenge me. She finds home in her books.
Excellent.
I feel that is the way that I fit it. But also when she and her to-be husband, like her eventual husband, start dating, I like this bit where she is like she doesn't want to go on like foreign holidays or anything. She doesn't want to go too far. Because she's like, the books and stuff I'll have to carry with me on the flight.
I can understand
bring
that,
them back. And so she they live in London, but they find like Norfolk as like their sort of home away from home because it has a lot of secondhand bookshops. Like that was his criteria for finding like it's close enough and we can carry our books with us and we can then buy a lot more books. So she's like a book obsessive. She buys a lot of books and like her second-hand bookshops, and like even when she was a student and stuff, she used to like just buy lots, like sort of inhales books and surrounds herself with books. And it's kind of like not really cultural criticism. It's also a weird mix of nonfiction. So it's a bit of a memoir, like you're learning about her life, but very much in relation to the books that she's reading about. So how books played a really important part in different stages of her life and open like specific books. So she writes about the specific books and like their kind of plot.
Can you give us at least one specific?
So the most recent one was she's become a mum, like she's just given birth. And she's having a really difficult time. She has postpartum depression, and she's finding it like one of the things, the ways that it's coming to fore is that she can't read. She doesn't have time to read because she has a newborn. She's going through her own, and for her that is like a big sort of crisis in identity, and it's like all like heaping up. So her mum does the sort of this really sort of generous act in that she gives her time to read. So she's like, helping take care of the grandchild. But she's like, no, I know you need to read. I know for you that's important. And what she really starts reading when she's doing, when like the newborn and stuff is Jack Reacher. She gets really into Jack Reacher. Why? Because she's like, I don't have to think too much about him because he thinks, but he thinks for a very limited amount. Like he goes around the US and he's just like metes out his kind of justice to the bad ones, to the villains, violent. And she's like, do you know how often newborn mums want to go around punching out people, like all the dangers out of their child's life?
That creature does
yeah.
Excellent.
So she's like, it's escapist, but it's also he's living out. Like I can't do that because I'd be put in jail and then my child would be. But I can like live through him. So it's that kind of stuff. Some she like learns in university, and some she has like an abiding hatred for Shakespeare because she never got into it.
Okay.
But she's very like non-judgmental about. She reads a lot of children's books, so I think I have that kind of going on. But she also, like, I think you would get along with her really well. I think you'd get along with this book as well really well. Because, like, I could see some sort of similarities in the kinds of sort of, like, the relationship with books and with people and stuff. And so she's talking about all these different books, but it doesn't feel like sort of extraneous, or it doesn't feel like, oh, it's a lesson or whatever. She's just like, it's just flowing in and out of her life. So even if you don't know her, like I didn't know her before I read Bookworm. She's a columnist. I think she writes columns and like she's a journalist and things, but I didn't know of her at all. You can still, like, if you love books, this is like very much a love letter to books and to reading and to having books play such an important role in your life, which it isn't for everybody. Like for some people, books, they like a normal amount.
Yes.
I don't think we like it a normal amount. And she's like very sympathetic to that. So currently where I've left her, is she's had a child, like it all got better and stuff. They've now bought a house in Norfolk, and the reason that she bought this house is because it had like a converted like shed or something, and she can make her dreams of having a library, a room of her own come true. So she's like, she's gotten like, she never thought she'd have such riches. And when I was coming on the train to work today, I was reading a little bit of the book as well. She's writing about how she's introducing her son to all the children's books that she loved, but also discovering new ones that she never had discovered before. And like she and her child are loving for different reasons. And the one that made me laugh so much was Goodnight Moon by Margaret Weiss Brown. Have you heard of this one?
Yes, vaguely.
So I felt, and like I've come across this in another book about books, as I read all the time. I'd forgotten what he had written about it, but in this one she writes, because I always thought it's this wholesome little book because it's that kind of title, right?
Did it not say like good night, mom, good night, dad, good night, stars, good night, trees?
And that's what I thought. That's what I thought as well. Like I thought it was like a very straightforward kind of book, and she is like, it is like living in bizarro land, and she loves it. So she writes, she's like, it just had like it's taking you along, like you think you know where you're going, and suddenly it like throw a thing. And then she writes about the author as well, and the author sounded completely madcap too. So I want to read about the author, but I just have a little bit that I memorized the page for. You'll be proud to know, without any bookmark. So she's made a couple of examples of like why this is a weird book. But then she says, on it goes in much the same vein. We pivot to saying goodnight to the room, moon and balloon, to the clock and socks, comb, brush, nobody and mush. Wait, you say what? We say goodbye to nobody. Yes, nobody. As you are being lulled to sleep, the child, and into a sense of order and security being restored after all the madness that went on before, Margaret Weiss Brown yanks you away by putting goodnight nobody in between gentle, sleepy biddings to the brush and the mush. What a brutal, brutalizing masterstroke. To a child, it can suggest unknown, unseeable, and yet crucially very much present monsters everywhere in its room. To an adult, it represents suddenly and all at once the essential unknowability of all things, the ultimate impenetrability of the human heart, the death of God, the existential void, and the bleak reminder of the certainty that just as we came into this life alone, so shall we leave it. The book goes on. The book goes on saying goodnight to the old lady. This old lady earlier on had appeared out of nowhere because she was sitting on a chair that she wasn't in definitely a few pages ago. We don't know where she's come from. We don't know where she goes. The book goes on saying goodnight to the old lady and ending with good night stars, good night air, and in case you weren't quite convinced yet that there are monsters under the bed, good night noises everywhere. Good night stars, air, and noises everywhere. There aren't many bedtime stories for tiny children that like to end on a note of infinite expansion and potential horrors rather than smallness and coziness. This is counterintuitive taken to unprecedented, maybe actually diabolic extremes. I love it. I hate it. The child is asleep. Is this reassuring or even more worrying? Good night, my own peace of mind forevermore. So this way, I was like giggling away in the train because of this analysis of this picture book. I definitely want to read the book. And then she talks about Library Lion. Have you ever read that book?
Yes, I can picture the cover.
I used to love reading it to my students in Mumbai. Like I bought a copy and like I loved reading it to people. I used it in workshops and stuff, but I hadn't thought about it in a while. And for her, it was a recent discovery with her son. And it just like she felt completely in love, and the way she writes about it. So I was laughing like when I left Glasgow, and then when I was coming to Coatbridge, I was like literally had to wipe tears from my eyes, because she writes with so much like emotion and pathos about the story. I was like, you're right, Lucy. This is such a beautiful book. It's just like it's that kind of book where I looked up Margaret Wise, her Brown's biographies, and immediately added it because I want to know more about this mad woman. And Library Line, I have a copy in Mumbai, which I'm going to later this year, and I'm definitely making space for it in my suitcase because I want to hug it because of Lucy.
Absolutely.
And it's just fantastic. I think you would. This is another kind of nonfiction that you would read and enjoy.
Do I need to read bookworm first?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it like if you're interested, I like yes, if you want to, but no, not at all.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So
she still talks about kids' books in this.
she does, because she never gives up on them. Like it, like in university, when she studies, she's really homesick, and she finds the secondhand bookshop, like which has lots of children's books, so it offers her a lot of comfort. So she reads throughout, and even here, she's very non-judgmental about all kinds of books. She reads a lot of romance, a lot of like kind of things like that you would maybe be like snobby about and stuff, and she's like, I have no kind of like sort of, you can read whatever you want, basically. So children's books, she writes in this chapter that she's reading with her son, but she's been reading them throughout, and she encourages people.
I'd like to know if she'd ever read Frederick Backman, because I'd be interested to see what she would say about that.
So she doesn't obviously write about every book that she's read, because I would be madness. She writes about books that
specific books that have made a difference.
That have made an impact on her life for whatever way.
If I was to meet a person, I think I would ask her.
Exactly. Which I think, and like this could be anybody's book. Like if you wrote a book with the kinds of books that shaped your life versus me, it's just interesting to know, especially for a book person.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, very nice.
Yes, so I think both these books I want to put on your TBR.
They will be. They already are.
So now I think we've homed enough.
Yes.
So what about our next episode?
So our next episode is going to be, what would you do?
Oh, you said it in a very soothing tone.
Or do you want me to do, what would you do?
Oh, very nice. That matches your himself. For me, I was more like, chaos demon hyperactive self. What would you do? I'm so sorry for your ears.
I think that's what he is enjoying, is the fact that we're looking at it in a vaguely different way.
Which is, agree. I'm so excited to see how you are going to fit what into what would you do? And me too. I don't know what I'm going to do, but we'll find out.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening.
See you next time.